right, let me get in the control room. All right, sweet. All right, so we are live. Thank you guys for joining me tonight on this stream. I am joined today by the BA Thompsonator. Am I saying that right?
That's right. Yeah, Thompsonator.
Tom-
Thompsonator for short. Yeah.
Thompsonator. So thanks guys for joining us tonight. I'm here with Thompsonator, and I invited him on my channel to kind of get into a couple topics on the stream. You know, kind of have like a laid back stream. As you guys know, as you see on my channel, I've been doing this more and more. You know, interacting with different people, different creators. You know, giving just a hand to different creators and inviting and kind of having these kind of long form conversations with live streams. It is kind of the future. Before the stream, me and Thompsonator were kind of talking about live streaming and what it's become. But today's topic was going to be violence in video games. And we're going to also get into like guns and gun control and kind of, why we're talking about this now and, all the recent crazy things that have been happening since the school shooting, the Parkland shooting. I think it's been kind of like the biggest event this year that's shaped the conversation, shaped what's going on in our media and stuff. So we're gonna get right into it. So Thompsonator, first, if you want to introduce yourself and your channel, what are you about and what is your channel about?
Sure. So I am BA Thompsonator, or just Thompsonator, and my channel is mainly about celebrating more, I guess, what you'd say, masculine entertainment. I'm primarily a movie channel where I talk about anything from action movies or kind of my specialty, but I also talk, war films. So anything, again, with that more masculine bent to it. I started off as a gaming channel, but, quickly just paying attention to internet culture, just really couldn't ignore some of the social issues that were going on with especially political correctness. This shit keeps coming up all the time, and also censorship. So I talk about those things as well on my channel, which is probably why I'm here right now.
Interesting. So I know your channel is more catered to like action movies as well. Like that's kind of the things you like talking about, right?
Yeah. I went to film school, so I'm kind of a big movie buff in general, but action movies are my favorite, so I have a tendency to talk and review those the most.
What's some of your favorite action movies? Are you kind of like the 80s, like Arnold and Stallone type of guy, or martial
Oh,
arts?
yeah, definitely. I mean, I love it all. My favorites, gosh, there's so many. My favorite film of all time. I actually just did a top 20 favorite films of all time, and number one would be Conan the Barbarian. So I am a big Schwarzenegger dude. Also like Rambo, and actually Rambo 2 is my favorite. So I mean I like Stallone as well. But I'm also a big Dolph Lundgren guy. Like if you've never seen it, Showdown in Little Tokyo. That's like one of the most satisfying action films that are made, on a kind of a like a more of the B movie scene. It was pretty good. It was early '90s, so I like a bit of it all.
Yeah, I haven't really. All I know him from is from like the Expendables and the Rocky movies. So I guess I'll have to check that out.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's kind of interesting. So the reason I kind of wanted to touch upon this, I was kind of surprised, when Trump came out and like the government, or I was seeing like articles and stuff talking about like, oh, like we need to worry about violence in video games and what are video games doing to affect our children and society nowadays. I found that interesting because we haven't heard about that argument in a long time. Usually I thought that argument was kind of like laid to rest. I remember growing up in the early 90s and, in 2000s and stuff, early 2000s. And, they were like, oh, video games is the cause, especially kind of after the Columbine shooting, the Columbine school shooting. I really got into that, and that's one of the things they blamed music around that time, like Marilyn Manson, and video games was one of them because it showed that they played the game Doom, like that first person shooter, and they were being inspired by these video games and stuff. We haven't really heard this argument in a long time, so I'm kind of surprised that they're kind of bringing it back, and I did kind of cringe at it. It's like, didn't we already lay this to rest? What what do you think about that?
Yeah, this is very, very weird. It's like I feel very conflicted about it because, for one thing, yes, it has been laid to rest. Study after study after study shows that there is no correlation between playing violent video games and going out and actually committing real acts of violence. It's not the same thing on any level, and it's the truth. That's true for all forms of media, I think, and we can get into that a bit more. What the conflicting part about it is the fact that this specter, which I thought had been, buried long underneath Jack Thompson's basement, is being risen by Trump. And I mean, as a Trump guy myself, someone who's been generally happy with his presidency so far, and definitely was a vocal supporter of him. Well, supported him and told my friends I supported him during the campaign.
Did
It's
you vote for
yeah,
him?
Oh, yes, yes, I voted for him.
Gotcha.
So it sucks to see. I mean, this is to me, it's kind of like strike two, really, in the last month because not only did he come out and say, okay, well, oh, maybe we need to, look at some uh, stricter gun laws, but now it's like, well, maybe it's the violent video games. And I don't know, man. Is he really being serious, or is this, Trump being Trump as he occasionally is? Is
Yeah.
this is this kind of his way of slowly walking stuff back, saying, "Yeah, I'm doing something about it," but in reality, he's not going to do anything about it?
Well, speaking of just things, I was very surprised even before the gun thing. Or maybe it was around the same time, but there was that footage of him having the meeting, and he was like, "Oh, we need to look into changing the gun laws and changing it to 21 years of age. We need to work on that on the new gun reform bill." And I was just like, "Dang, like, am I living in a different reality? Like, if Obama or a Democratic president was saying this, people would be like outraged. People, especially on the, on the right, the conservative side, who like their guns and are basically the NRA and proponents of basically say that we don't want to make any new laws because we can't lose any ground in gun laws because one thing will lead to another. But usually around these events, that's when you start having these conversations. And I found that very interesting what Trump said about changing laws. And just a couple of days ago in Florida, they had the governor pass that new bill where you have to be 21 years of age to buy a gun. What is your opinion about all that?
I think it's unconstitutional and really ridiculous. I mean, you have people who they've had guns in their household probably their entire lives. Or okay, I mean, maybe that's a bad argument.
Sure.
You have people who are 18 years of age who are living on their own. Maybe they're at a university and it's not the safest place, and they can't buy a gun. They can't buy a gun to defend themselves because they're not 21. You have people who are, 18 years old, they can sign up, they can go, fire giant 50 caliber machine guns for Uncle Sam, but they can't come home and they can't own a gun when they put on their civilian clothes. This is nuts. I mean, and I do think that I actually am in Florida. I think Rick Scott is, I mean, I don't know what to think about him, but now I guess I'm, my neutral stance has now become, I'm not a fan because, dude, it's like all it's going to take is some 18-year-old, who I guess can't defend themselves or something. And a situation comes up is like, if only I'd been able to buy a gun, but I was denied that, and it's going to blow up in their face.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's crazy. This gun debate is very big, and I know we're kind of touching on that first, but it is kind of a mixed topic with media and stuff. So, 2 points is first one is I've never seen, like, you have to admit that this is a very huge turning point, in the not turning point, but event, right? Every time you have someone like, these school shootings, it's like huge, it's big. And this last one in the beginning of the year was huge, it's 17 kids dead. And for the first time, growing up with this and seeing, different the events and stuff, and how we're exposed to media, you're seeing like kids post their Snapchat and they're in the school and they're filming the gunshots and stuff, and it is pretty scary. And they had the kids, and what I kind of disagree with it is they're kind of like politicizing the kids, and the kids are out there like, we're martyrs, we need to change something. They have accomplished that. The media loves them. There's that And I was even contemplating if she wrote an article, that Emma Gonzalez, she's that like, shaved haired girl who was one of the survivors for the school. And she's been kind of plastered everywhere with her face. And, she's got like over 1 million or 2 million followers on Twitter and stuff. And it is kind of crazy just what has happened since this shooting. I understand it's a very tragic event. But then so I was watching the news and I see the governor in Florida, he passed that law with the 21 years of age stuff. But then a couple days, either the same day or the day before, or I forget when, somewhere else there was that guy, the veteran who kind of just went crazy. He left the veterans facility or something that like took care of veterans and people work there, the government place. And he just went crazy and he took like 3 people hostage and ended up killing them. And he just went nuts. And he was he was a retired, vet who was just crazy, who's sick, obviously. And, no law could have stopped that, no law, could have stopped him doing that. And I know they've passed this law because it's like, oh, because he was 18 years old, there's been other mass shootings too, where the guy was over 21 years of age. So, I don't know how this is going to help, but people wanted to see this change. And finally there was this event that, made it happen.
Yeah, I have a lot of feelings about this kind of stuff because on one hand it just sucks and it's like you really wish that every time this happened that there was some way it could have been stopped. Uh, but what makes me really frustrated about these shootings, and the more I study kind of the issues in politics, the more frustrated I get with it, is that the movements towards we need stricter gun control laws, they're always highly political. Like they'll come there and they'll be like, this is a clear indicator that we need to make sure that guns aren't available to people, and if you disagree then you're just out there, you're in support of the slaughtering of innocents. And I'm like, no, 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 that's such bullshit.
That is annoying. Just to interject, that was the second point I forgot to raise. I hate how they had that town hall meeting with the kids there, and they had the sheriff and the NRA spokesperson, that lady Dana Lausch, or I don't know how to say her last name,
Yeah.
and then Marco Rubio was the only Republican, with the balls to go there. He was basically going into a lion's den, and it was just being shouted out. And it's like, if you don't move on this issue, if you don't change on this, the blood of these kids are on your hands, and think of the children. It just, because it's kids, it's like, you don't care about kids, you don't care about children. And they kind of play that card, just because you might not agree with changing the law. I just found that kind of the most like just cringeworthy and just annoying thing about the whole thing.
Yeah, it's like, yes, I'm sure Marco Rubio, I mean, I voted for Rubio too. I thought he was the best guy in the ballot at the time. He's kind of annoying sometimes, but he's all right. I mean, I respect the fact that he showed up there. Yeah, it's like, okay, yes, but my point is that I'm sure Rubio sits around in his office and goes, okay, yes, I just want kids to die. That's really what I want. I don't want votes. I just want kids to die. Yeah, sure. And they do that every single time. It's like, if you don't want to pass more gun laws, you just want people to die because you're being paid money by the NRA. It's like, no, 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 no. The NRA does not give nearly enough money to anyone to get them to be okay with, having death on their hands. All right. It's not nearly enough money. It's like single digits for pretty much everyone's individually in Washington. No, it's because we understand why the Second Amendment is there. It's the second part of the Constitution, or the Bill of Rights, for a reason. It's
Yeah.
it's part of why this country is the way. I mean, it's first off, it's why this country even came to be in the first place, and it's there to make sure that that this country always exists. That there's never a time and place where the government can basically change the United States in a way that would make it no longer even resemble the country it is even today.
Yeah, I used to be very ignorant on the topic, and when I was when I was these kids' age in high school, I admittedly was very ignorant about guns. And I don't know if you remember that movie by Michael Moore, Bowling for Columbine. Have you seen it?
That one, I have so many movies on my list to check out. No, I have not seen that one.
So that was that came around that came out around when I was like in high school or even before that, and I saw it, and it was kind of like it like kind of brainwashed me because though if you, I mean you should check it out if you're really interested about this stuff because it was basically saying how the NRA and America is so dangerous or the NRA or let me backtrack. The NRA is responsible for the deaths of these kids, or of people who are shot because we have too many guns, and America is just so gun free. And the beginning of the documentary, he's like, "Look how easy it is for me to open a bank account and I get a free gun. Oh my god!" And then it's called Bowling for Columbine because apparently the Columbine shooters like did a whole bunch of events before they went and did their thing, kind of like a last hurrah thing, kind of what jihadis do too as well. They like party and stuff before they do what they're gonna do. Basically, one of their events that they did, they went bowling. So they, the documentary explains where that name came from, but the Columbine shooters was the whole center focus on that, and they actually had like he in the documentary he has one of the kids who was shot by the Columbine shooters, and he was paralyzed in a wheelchair because of that, and he took like the bullets that were lodged in him and tried to return it at the Walmart that the kids bought it from, the Columbine shooters. And the whole point was kind of just to show like, look, you guys are responsible for selling these bullets to the kids who shot me. And it's kind of like, uh, I suggest you check it out. And I watched that and I was just like, oh my God, this is so right. Like, if only we didn't have guns, if only like, we're living in such a gun culture and it's contributing to all these deaths and things. And that's how I thought for a long time. And I kind of grew up and, I basically realized, one day I think I remember I was talking to my mom and, I'm originally from Brazil. Brazil has very strict gun laws, right? And even though I was born there, I came over when I was very young. I didn't grow up there. So one time I was talking to her and I'm like, America, you see these crazy shit that happen. There's these mass shootings. There's events where, some wacko gets a gun and, if someone wants to just walk up and buy a gun and kill somebody, they can do that in America. They can't do that in other countries, and she was like, okay, so, how about back in Brazil where the gun, okay, so we have laws, right? So boom, now we have laws. Guess what? In Brazil is have some of the highest crime. Why do you think I left there? Why do you think we left there? And she was saying how basically the law is punishing the law-abiding citizens who can't have guns. Guess who doesn't give a shit about laws? Criminals, bandits. In Portuguese we call it bandidos, bandits. They don't care about the laws. Yeah, and they're over there in the streets killing, very high violence. And it is, and basically to kind of summarize this thought, basically the argument is kind of twisted nowadays where it's like, look at it, and the documentary does this too, the Bowling for Columbine, where it's like, look at how many people are dying in America because of guns. Look at how many, and then they have the statistics. Of course, it's high, right? And they also include suicides in there because usually the number that's presented, it can be cut in half if it doesn't include people just offing themselves, which they're not. Yeah, it is tragic. It's a suicide, but you can't throw that into a violent crime. Someone's not going out and changing the lives of others with a gunshot, right? They're changing themselves, right? So that number can be cut in half if you remove that. And then they placed it against the European number. Look at all these countries, like, yeah, they barely have gun deaths. If we take Europe and we take Australia and we take Japan and we take all these countries, it won't even, if we add them all together, it can't even, it doesn't even get close to United States numbers. But they never include like violent crime, and there's still violent crime all over the world. Yeah, maybe there's less guns, but at least here we have guns that are actively helping people and saving people. And that's kind of how I used to think, and finally just after research and like most people do, I think it kind of just grow up. So
Sure. I mean, yeah, I before really even 28, I was very just partisan. I mean, I didn't care about politics. I was either apolitical or I was partisan towards right leaning issues. Yeah, they never. Yes, I was looking at that just today because I was reading all different sources on the issue, and Vox is horrible. They're very, I mean, far left out there. They'll sit there and they'll talk about how it's the biggest problem ever. And then, but the reality is that overall, yes, there are 33,000, gun-related deaths in the U.S. every year. But okay, like 20,000 of those are suicides, and then like 10,000 of those are gang-related. So okay, those can be. I mean, get rid of the guns. You're not necessarily going to get rid of those two things. And yeah, they do. They sit there and they're like, okay, per capita, the U.S. has this insane, like, gun death ratio. But it's like, okay, yes, but you're not even factoring in like deaths by knives or other types of violence. So, I mean, they're very dishonest on purpose. And I mean, I think anyone who's like even just reasonable about it can see that what they're trying to do. It's pretty obvious.
Yeah, it is pretty crazy. But getting back to video games, I wanted to show you a video and kind of just get your reaction to it, and just feel free to pause me in the middle of it. But basically, a couple days, if you guys don't know, if you're watching the White House a couple days ago, with Trump and other people, his staff, they showed this video to a panel of, correct me if I'm wrong about this, but it was a panel of other people in the video game industry having a conversation about violence in video games, and is it affecting our youth? Is it affecting society? And they have this little reel that they uploaded to their official White House channel. But let me play this video here real quick.
The president talked about gun violence today with members of the video game industry, which generated a record $37 billion last year. Is there a link between virtual violence and the real thing? Here's Anna Warner.
The White House put out these video game scenes timed with today's meeting. Last month, President Trump said this.
This is what kids are watching, and I think you maybe have to take a look at it.
Today, he met parents like Melissa Henson.
The kinds of messages and images that they are putting in their minds, I think they're seeing nightly dress rehearsals for huge acts of violence.
But this psychologist says,
we see video games actually being used as a scapegoat for what I think might be the real causes of violence.
Patrick Markey's research shows 80% of mass shooters did not show an interest in violent video games.
It seems like something that should actually make us safer. So it's a total understandable reaction. The problem is just the science, the data does not back up that it would actually have an effect.
But other critics point to this, the appearance of weapons in video games, like this Remington assault rifle pictured in popular game Call of Duty. The images come from a lawsuit by Sandy Hook parents who are suing Remington, saying the company bears responsibility for the killings of 26 people at the school by shooter Adam Lanza in 2012.
He was within this younger male demographic that Remington was trying to sell guns to.
Attorney Josh Koskoff.
What we're seeing here is what I've described as a chickens coming home to roost scenario, where you sell so recklessly so many of these weapons to so much of this high-risk demographic.
We reached out to Remington and other gun manufacturers, but did not hear back. The Entertainment Software Association that represents the video game industry said it told the president today that numerous scientific studies show there's no connection between video games and violence. In fact, Jeff, the researchers we interviewed today said that his work shows that when a new violent video game is released, that crime actually drops. Why? They think possibly because kids stay at home and off the streets.
That's amazing to think about. It's something that parents should know.
Yeah, that was pretty interesting.
Yeah.
What I didn't know about the whole Sandy Hook thing with the Remington assault rifle, and when she's like, we reached out to Remington and they for a response, and I'm thinking like if someone gets run over by a Honda, are we gonna reach out to Honda for like hey, like you created this vehicle that was the cause of the death of my kid or something? It's like, no, that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
Why are we looking at that?
Yeah, exactly. it's kind of like before, we were talking about Michael Moore taking the bullets back to Walmart. It's like, yes, because the bullets malfunctioned. It wasn't that a psychopath used the bullets.
Yeah.
That's the whole thing. Like, guns are inanimate objects. We could have a billion. You could go out there and lay a billion guns on the corner of my neighborhood. Nothing's going to happen. No one's going to pick them up and start shooting each other with them. The guns aren't going to magically start going off. It's that's insane. Did they actually say? I'm forgetting now. Did they say Remington assault rifle?
Yeah.
So that's another fallacy. So like, assault rifles technically do not exist, but if they did, they would be automatic rifles used by the military. Assault rifles cannot be purchased by, civilians. We can purchase semi-automatic rifles, which is one trigger, one bullet, click, 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 click. I mean, and really any gun made in like the last 100 years, including a double action revolver, actually fits that criteria. So when they say things like, oh, he bought this Remington assault rifle. No, he didn't. He bought a semi-automatic civilian rifle that may have been based off of, the AR-15 in some way or another, which AR doesn't stand for assault rifle, it stands for Armalite.
Yeah, yeah. And it's and that kind of is what exposed my ignorance a lot to, with the whole gun conversation, is because a lot of people, when you go to talk to them, they're like, we need to ban all semi-automatic weapons. And it's like, do you know what a semi-automatic weapon is? So you want to ban all guns, essentially. It's like, no, I just want to ban the big, scary ones. And it's like, well, do you know what semi-automatic means? And it's like, oh, no, they don't know what it means. It's like, usually people, they don't know the terminology, and that's very important with the, they had, again, the kids, they all got on a bus and they went to the Senate, and it's like, we need to look at this bill. And the bill, I don't know if, they struck it down, or everyone, or pretty much all the Republicans, like, immediately struck it down. And all, the kids, like, they had the pictures of them crying and gasping. But it's like the bill, the wording of it was, is very close to, like, all guns. You have to be very careful with these laws, And I was also heard I was thinking the other day too, when someone says like, oh, like, I don't believe in the Second Amendment, or I believe in the Second Amendment, or it's like it's not a religion, like, who cares if you believe in it or not? It's the law, I thought, I always found that pretty funny.
Yeah, something that really pisses me off is about a lot of these people is that they sit there and they'll be like, oh, I have mass respect for, the Constitution. The founding fathers were brilliant men, and they made the best country ever. And then in the same exact paragraph, they'll turn around and they'll go, but the Second Amendment's out of date, it needs to be done away with. And free speech is bad. And it's like, no, it doesn't work both ways. You don't get to sit there and say the founding fathers and the Constitution is great, and then right there also say, but like, oh, but they were really stupid because they never realized that gun weapons technology was never going to progress past the musket.
I don't hear that. I hear more of the opposite. I hear a lot of people dissing like the founding fathers, like, oh. I hear more of that. I feel.
I mean, yeah, I must not be running in those circles. Like, I usually hear, typically I'm reading, like an article from somebody who doesn't want to come out and say that, yeah, they don't like the founding fathers or, the laws that they put in place, because that would piss off a lot of people. But yeah, that's interesting. I'm sure there are a lot of people out there also saying just like, yeah, I don't think this was a good idea.
No. What I mean is, like, the people making the argument, usually who people are making the argument, they'll say like, oh, they weren't that great, or, actually the founding fathers, they had no idea where technology would be nowadays, and like all the guns and all the stuff we have. And it's like, granted, that's true. However, people usually they don't understand like the Second Amendment, where it's like, are you part of a well-regulated militia? And it's like, no, you don't understand. The militia is the people, that the citizens, and a lot of people don't understand that. But yeah, I get so tired having these conversations with people. But
Yeah.
someone was mentioning in the chat too, when it came to the school shooting, the Parkland shooting, people had this hate and this vitriol towards the NRA. Of course, they're the big bad villains. But where's all this? Where's all this anger, or where's all this attention maybe directed towards the FBI and the police department? Because they had the two officers, or like two or three officers who didn't even go inside the building. Like, I think those dudes should be criminally punished. What do you think?
I think Parkland is not. Yeah, of course they're trying to pin it all on. I think the one-armed guard who was stationed at the school, and the NRA. Again, the NRA is the boogeyman who allows all this to occur. I think if Parkland, if anything, it shows us that government, the fallibility of government, and how giving trust into the government for everything to protect us is a bad idea. You have this guy, Nicholas Cruz, who is clearly deranged. I mean, he's posting, violent stuff on his social media accounts. He's posting stuff like, I want to shoot up people on YouTube. He gets reported to the FBI. The FBI basically, farts and drops the ball, doesn't do anything, like twice, doesn't do anything. When it's all you have to do is Nicholas Cruz. I mean, they have thousands of open source cowboys, combing the internet, and they didn't pick up on the fact that this dude's posting this stuff in relation to each other on his social media accounts. He gets kicked out of school, I believe. The cops in his area got called out to his house like 37 times. I mean, this is a sick kid. And if he had a record for all the times that he'd committed crimes, then he wouldn't have been able to buy the guns. So, and then the police, the guy who's like didn't go in, he heard the shots and he waited for backup or something. Yeah, that's cowardly. That sucks. But I mean, he's just one dude and he's basically probably like he's on the job. I mean, they are trained to wait for backup. Like, you can rely on cops, but I mean, the average response time of a cop is 10 minutes. I used to actually do alarm security, and it's like, look, yes, you can rely on cops, but they're not going to get there in time to stop anything if somebody really wants to get in there and hurt you, and the really, loud noise coming from the alarm on your wall ain't going to do nothing either. Have a gun, have a dog.
Yeah, that's where you need a gun. I always tell people, like, this was a clear example of why I don't trust the government, in terms of not like they're conspiring, but people I think someone was in the chat saying like, oh, they're actors and it's always a conspiracy, right? I'm not real into conspiracies, and I used to be like I used to like be real heavy in like the 9/11 conspiracy, because of like this documentary that came out, and Loose Change. Like, I found it on YouTube, or not on YouTube. I found it on the internet somewhere, not even before YouTube, like back in the day. And I got real wrapped up into that. But when it comes to conspiracy theories, this is what I always tell people, and kind of what I talk about on my channel, is that people put too much faith in the government. Like, people put too much like credence into the government. And it's like, have you guys ever gone to the DMV? Have you guys ever gone to like, places that are government ran, and then you see why like people hate the government, and why people like hate this, unions, and people can never lose their job. Like, I was having a conversation with someone about like this hospital, like the VA hospital, and the VA is another question too. And they're like, oh yeah, it's so great. No one can ever lose their job if they really can't do it. And I'm like, isn't that a bad thing? Like, shouldn't we make something like where people are responsible for their job, and if they don't do their job, we can freaking fire them?
Right.
Why do you think it's so hard to get a teacher fired?
Yeah.
So people put all this faith into the government, or they'll try to say conspiracy, but it's like, usually it's on the fault of negligence. It's not this grand plan, master plan. It's not that. Usually what the case is, it's people not following up on their leads and, you know, not doing their job well. It's just people. It's just people. And whenever it's a government ran thing, it's not going to be the best. And people don't understand. Some people don't understand that. More and more people are realizing that. And it's case in point because so the FBI is investigating this, or supposedly they have, you know, they're trying to see what's going on and prevent this stuff from happening. So the kid, Nicholas Cruz, he comments on his YouTube account on a YouTube video, "Hey, I'm going to be the next school shooter." And the FBI goes to the house of the guy who uploaded the video, who has nothing to do with the guy who commented. It's like, I get comments all the time on my YouTube channel. Like, people have nothing to do with, if they're commenting something on my channel, I don't have any control of that. I have no idea where, I can't find someone from that, you know, and it just shows the incompetence. It shows like there's not someone working there. There's not people, there's not a bright mind there, like, oh, like knows how to use the internet, right? It's like,
Right.
you know, it's like the grandma Facebook meme, you know, like doesn't know how to use, or the grandma doesn't know how to use the internet meme. It's like these people in these positions with these high salaries, and they don't know how to fucking do their job.
Yeah, no, they don't. Yeah, they don't understand the internet. I think obviously, uh, yeah, and I mean, when it comes to internet, government conspiracies, I totally agree. Every time somebody throws a conspiracy at me, I mean, I try to have a little bit of sympathy because usually they sit on like my side of the fence. But I'm like, okay, guys, think about this for a second. Have you ever interacted with the government? When was the last time you did? Do you trust them to run anything correctly? No. So why do you trust them to pull off this elaborate scheme? That's, if you just look at, if you put all the pieces of the puzzle together, suddenly it makes sense. I mean, even the military, like you always hear, like, if you watch a movie or somebody will be like, call the military. It's like, yeah, good luck with that. You're going to call the military and get some, I don't know, E3 somewhere who's like, yeah, I'll run this up the chain and get it back to you. And like 6 weeks later, all at once, the tanks start rolling in your town to do something. I mean, it's the government is not fast and efficient at anything, which is why I wouldn't trust them to run my healthcare either. But, that's kind of another conversation.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. And that's kind of with my videos too, is just showing people that, kind of less government, have less government as possible. That's going to, that is why this country is so great, is the less government involvement as possible. And it is kind of weird too, when you look at other countries, about something a lot of people don't realize too, is with the First Amendment and with like freedom of speech. The freedoms we have, I think that's the most important one, especially, like, I don't know if you're keeping up with what's happening with I think her name is Brittany Pettibone. She's like a right-wing YouTuber, and she like collaborates with like Lauren Southern, and she and then she was with this other guy. I don't know any of his content, but that guy Count Dankula or something. Have you heard of him?
Yes, I've heard of all of them, and I heard that she was detained by the UK police, which my respect for the UK police is non-existent. Yeah, I haven't seen any of her content. I know that Count Dankula was the guy with the Zeke Heiling dog, which got him in trouble with his police too, which is insane.
Right, and that's what I wanted to touch upon, is that their government, people don't realize, like, if you spout like something that's considered Islamophobic, right? Usually, which there hasn't been one in a long time, thankfully. But usually they'll have like these terrorist attacks in Europe and stuff, in the UK, and people will be complaining on social media, and like the police will like people will flag them for hate speech. Like, hate speech is something that exists in other countries that doesn't exist here. And a lot of people don't realize that can be turned against you. Like, comedians in Canada, are sometimes sued and fined for hate speech, thousands of dollars. Like, a comedian, like, one time went off on a heckler, and he was fined like 20 grand, and had like a criminal strike because of bad words, hate speech. You know, and then they got detained in the UK, and you know, there's so much shit going on. There's so much shit going on in Europe now with terrorism, and you know what's going on, and they put their focus on these like hate speech and people stepping on a line and people saying mean things on the internet, and it kind of mind boggles me why, like, and people, Americans really need to see that and say, hey, this is why, you know, our country, like, yeah, we're not perfect, but this is something that will never happen here because of the Constitution, because of the First Amendment.
Right, and the Second Amendment too. It's like, yeah, that, I mean, everything I see coming out of Britain and all of Europe is just insane. I would be in jail. Like, there's no way. Like, I mean, like, you know, you have some guy, like some Antifa thug who runs up, and I remember this video with Lauren Southern where Antifa is attacking her, and they would attack her, and they'd run off, and you know, she would call them out on it, and then the police would come up and, you know, and talk to her. And she was just like, why are you talking to me? There's the guy who attacked my cameraman over there. And, you know, like, yeah, but, you know, think about what you said to maybe set him off in attacking you. I'm like, bullshit. Like, I mean, I like our police department. Yeah, they don't, like, our police, they don't always get it right. But at least they aren't total pussies. You know what I mean? Really.
Yeah. A lot of people don't realize, you know, one of the main things I hate, and that has been kind of coming up nowadays too, is a huge like anti-cop narrative, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, where I work, I was really close with my local police department, and you know, I help, you know, usually, you know, as clients, you know, police officers that come in and stuff. And they were talking to me one day, and this was 2 years ago, but I had this cop talking to me, and he was like, yeah, man, I feel like this is the worst time to be a cop. And this was kind of around the you know, one of those major shootings or whatever, very, you know, one of the cop shootings or what, or not the cop shootings, but like around, you know, shooting an unarmed black man, one of those shootings. And this was kind of around that time. And he was telling me like, yeah, man, to nowadays it's the worst time to be a cop. He's like, I actually had a kid who was like around me or like walking up to me trying to talk to me, and somewhere, maybe at a school or park or somewhere. And then the mom like told the kid to like not talk to the cop, and it was like, don't talk to him, like they're bad or something like that. And he was like, that was like one of the worst moments in my career. And like, so it's so ignorant, you know. So it's so crazy how the media was at before, very like this anti-cop narrative. And it's disgusting because, you know, people don't realize these guys' jobs, a police officer's job, is to, you know, go in danger every day. You know, every day they're responding to 911 calls, you know, to protect you, to give you safety. You know, I come from from a country that our cops sucked. Our cops are corrupt and don't have power. And there's certain neighborhoods, very, you know, they call them the favelas. You know, I didn't come from a favela, but you go to the favela areas, very ghetto, poor, downtrodden areas, and the gangs literally run the territory. It's like some, you know, it's like some shit you see at a movie, but it's the reality where the gangs run the play. I don't know if you've seen that scene in the Fast and Furious 5 where they go and the police, it's true, the police they don't go to these certain neighborhoods because they will get assassinated, because they'll get shot and they'll get killed. And you know, and people who live around these areas, sometimes if they call the police, it'll take a long time for them to come. You know, yes, we have bad areas here as well, you know, ghetto areas, you know, poor areas. But we still have a very strong police, especially compared to many countries. And I get like a lot of young people, a lot of people don't realize that.
Yeah, they don't. Yeah, and I know exactly what you're talking about. You know, with places that the cops won't go. I mean, you know, it's insane. You know, it's like New York Police Department. I used to have to call them up quite a bit. You know, dispatching on various alarms, and it's like you called them up, they knew what to do, and they were like, "We will be there within minutes." It's like I can't imagine. You know, like it'd be like, yeah, not only are you disarmed, so you can't protect yourself, but by the way, the police aren't coming. And if they do, then maybe they'll arrest you because it'll just be easier to diffuse the situation. Or, you know, maybe if the gang member pays them off, maybe they'll just look the other way once they get there. It's nuts. it's exactly why we need a Second Amendment here, and it's why it's there. I think one of the reasons.
Of course, yeah. So you're saying this is in New York, you said?
Yeah, New York Police Department is really like they're really on point. I mean, it kind of helps when they're like, I think what the one of the largest standing armies in the world, more or less. But yeah, I used to have to. Part of my job was I would call police departments all over the United States, everywhere from Anchorage, Alaska, down to Miami-Dade, and it was fascinating, dude. Like some police departments, they would take like 15 minutes to answer the phone sometimes, just to dispatch on something. But the ones that really had their stuff together, like New York Police Department, Miami, some of them were really on point, and it's like, wow, it's. I mean, not only was it nice to work with, kind of work with them, but also be like, yeah, those are the kind of cities I'd want to be in,
Sure, sure. That's pretty interesting. But yeah, so getting back to the video I played for the audience, there was the video, basically the White House. I think I already said this in the stream, where they played a video of a montage of different video games, of different scenes from the games. There was, I don't know if you play that game. There was one scene in there where there's a level in the game that the player, I think it was in Call of Duty, I think it was like Modern Warfare 2, because I was around that. I actually played video games around that time when that whole thing was happening, when that game came out, and I played it. And that game, they actually give you the option in the game to skip that level. But in the level, they're basically like mowing down people in the airport. I think it's called No Russian, and it's a very like popular level and stuff. Do you know about that?
So I didn't know about. I didn't know what a lot of those games were. I knew what Sniper Elite was. My reaction to that montage is I'm like, great. So now I know what 5 or 6 games to play next.
Sure.
Like, I mean, I'm not. Yeah, it's like you put that stuff together, and all the pearl clutchers and soccer moms, they throw a hissy fit about it because they don't get that. It's like, okay, yes, these games are maybe offensive to you, but in light of evidence and data, they don't have a negative effect on your son. Actually, soccer mom, ma'am, your son actually probably benefits from these games because they allow him to get out his male aggression in a way that's completely safe and doesn't hurt anyone.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's kind of weird that this argument is coming back, and it's like, you guys really want to go up against this? Like, our culture and everything is kind of shaped around the video game culture nowadays, and people have kind of, grown up with these games and stuff. So it is kind of a losing battle they're gonna have. I don't think this is gonna go much further. But that one scene in that game, though, it is where it's like, is this something that should have existed? Because when you play that game, it is kind of jarring, and it's like it is kind of a weird scene where it's just a group of dudes with these machine guns essentially, and they're like mowing down people in the airport, and it is kind of fun. But it was kind of the first time I was like, wow, like, yeah, if someone could see this and get inspired. Luckily, I mean, that's never happened, and airports are usually some of the very most protected places you can go. But I did find it where it's like, yeah, that one game, I kind of give you credit with that, but that's never happened. So there's not really supporting evidence.
Well, it's kind of like people know at a very early age, they know what is real and isn't real. They know that what they're playing is a game, and that going out and doing that in real life would be wrong. 1, 2, it would be horrific. And that's really the disconnect. Is like, yeah, okay, you can play. Most people play violent games. It's kind of cathartic. It's fun. It's yes. I mean, you have a lot of guys who do play these games. Yeah, we're aggressive. So we get really into it, but we don't have a desire to go out and shoot people in real life. The only person who does that is cracked to begin with, and it doesn't matter if they play violent video games. They're going to find some excuse to try to justify their crackiness. I mean, it's like if we banned all guns out of every video game, you'd hear some report of like, oh, kid was inspired by Mario to go, curb stomp some people in his neighborhood. It's
Yeah.
like he saw him jumping on the Goombas, so he jumped on his friend's head. No, they would make that argument.
I think it's a weird argument to make too, because like, man, our times are changing so much, like with technology and what we're exposed to. Like I was just thinking about it, like when I grew up, there was no smartphones, there was no internet. And the fact that like if something like that, because that exists nowadays, because these new technology and these new things exist nowadays, kids are growing up different. If you have a younger sibling, if you have a younger cousin or someone in your family, they're having a different, they're growing up different. I mean, just like the generation before you and before you as well, where, where technology is, you're growing up in a different era and a different time. But nowadays, like people worry about video games. I'm more worried about people addicted on their, I mean, not real games, but just addicted to like smartphones in general, like tablets, One of my hugest pet peeves is like when I see, like I'll go to a restaurant or I'll go somewhere and the parents like have the kids with like a tablet on their like on their table, and the kids like have headphones and they're just like gonked out like watching a tablet. And it's like,
Yeah.
you think that's a good exposure? Like and then you try to take it away and they're like, and it's like, yeah, it's like this is not a healthy thing, at least in my opinion. I feel like so after time after time, that's going to have a certain effect on the younger generation.
Sure. It's so new. So it's like, will kids, I mean, growing up, will they have problems, or will it be like, they've been interacting with their friends online, so they still got that social interaction they needed, they just got it in a different form. But yeah, that's kind of like the whole helicopter parenting thing. I don't think it's good. I definitely think it could lead to a whole generation of people who don't really know how to really sort of negotiate with each other in real life, because they're too used to being in complete dominant control of their own little world. And I think social media, for sure, like if it wasn't for being a YouTuber, I would not be on social media. Like I honestly, like I fucking hate Facebook. I hate it a lot. And I'm not a big fan of really all social media in general, because a lot of the people who really get addicted to it, I think it's a form of narcissism, really. And I don't like it.
Yeah. I mean, social media is definitely a big one. I feel like, you have to consider the fact that we are social creatures, and we are kind of becoming, technology is great. Social media is great. Social media is the reason that we're able to have this conversation and we're live. And if you travel, like if you were to go 20 years in the past and say, hey, you know what, in the future, there's going to be this thing called the internet, and it basically allows you to have conversations with people all over the world, and they can see you and you can see them. People would be like what? Like, what are you talking about, dude? You're crazy. Like you can't even, they wouldn't be able to comprehend that. Most people would. I don't think anyone would be able to if you were to like go in a time machine and ask them.
Yeah.
There's many good things, right? But I feel like there are also some cons too. There's bad things too, and because of this new era and this new time period that we're living in, we have to be very careful with people growing up very antisocial. Like they'll be able to send a message or talk to someone through a keyboard or through a smartphone, but then when they're actually in an actual physical place, they can't do it. Soon you have like the HTC Vive and you have the VR. Like we're within 10 years, dude, we're probably gonna create a Matrix type thing, like this kind of computer thing that just sits in your room, and hey, you want to plug in and you're gonna go into this this digital world that seems so real, and then people are gonna be enamored with it and they're gonna be stuck in that thing. And there's gonna be people who don't use that, people who don't want to use that type of technology, and then other people will pick on them, or kids might pick on them, like, oh, you don't want to be plugged in, you don't want to interact in this new thing, like, oh, they're gonna ostracize them. That's what I just sit around sometimes and just get mind blown thinking about.
Yeah, it definitely brings up images of cyberpunk art, a la like William Gibson's Neuromancer, with the guy who looks like a cracked addict in his like apartment somewhere, like plugged into the machine, and he's been there obviously for like days, just wasting away. Yeah, it's going to be weird to see where it goes. I definitely think kind of that virtual world you could plug into is going to be a reality someday.
Yeah, like I said, we're gonna create a real matrix. In a ways. So, do you think with this topic of violence in video games, and Trump was mentioning also violence in movies and things that we're exposed to and that we're seeing? Do you think that like we're more desensitized now because of like what we're seeing, or like was it worse before, or was it better before? Everyone always has that argument of the good old days. What's your opinion on that?
Um, I do think we are desensitized, definitely. I mean, just being a millennial and growing up with those violent video games. I mean, I remember very first game I ever played was Doom when I was 6, and still one of my favorites. Yeah, and it's like when by the time Passion of the Christ came out, when I was like, I was raised in church, and that movie came out, and everyone's watching it, and they're just sitting there horrified, and I'm basically sitting there like, yeah, it's a good movie. It's a little slow, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, we are desensitized, but I think it's better that we are. It's like you could see that there's a downward trend in violent crime, and I do think it's because people have been exposed to it, the fictional side of it, via video games, and we realize that that isn't real, but in reality, it would be horrific. And and we're not, because we've been exposed to it in a fictional form. I don't think people have this maybe as much fascination with what would that be like in real life, to do that or to experience that. I don't know, maybe not, but I definitely think these outlets are healthy and they do help people, reach catharsis and make them less likely to go out and try to work out their social alienations on other people, actually.
Yeah. I mean, I would definitely agree. I mean, I grew up playing video games, and I grew up in a very strict household, very strict household, to the point where, one of my favorite games, and anyone who's watching now live or later, my whole channel and my theme on my channel is based around Street Fighter. My avatar, my banner, like the music I have up there in my videos. Street Fighter, like when I played that game when I was a kid on Super Nintendo, I was like, I loved it. Like I wanted to be like Ryu. I wanted to dress up like him. Like usually people have like these games and these things. My cousin, she loves Legend of Zelda. She had like her whole room is like full of Legend of Zelda stuff, and she has all the games and she loves it. Everyone has that thing, and she's is my age. Like we grow up with these things. We grew up with video games, and it affects us. Like I said, we're living in a new culture where these the adults and the people who have grown up with this stuff, now they're adults, and it's not affecting, but it's influenced their lives, or their career choices, or many things. And what I was going to say is that I remember growing up, and my aunts like didn't want me to play like Street Fighter. Like they would see it and they would think it was so bad, because it's like oh, like these characters they're teaching you to like beat each other up. They're teaching you to fight or something. And it's like, no, it's not. Like this is an exaggeration. This is a fiction.
Right.
And then also too, one of the most famous games that was blamed for everything, Grand Theft Auto. I got in trouble. I got grounded for playing Grand Theft Auto Vice City back in the day, because yes, that was a very violent game and it was kind of surreal. But I grew up and I played all of them, and I would play them in secret away from my parents and people, my family members, who would try to punish me for not playing these games. I grew up just fine. I didn't, because I played Grand Theft Auto. I still play Grand Theft Auto to this day. I'm not influenced, and I don't have any desire to go out and kill or do all these crimes and stuff. It's kind of like an escape. People grow up with this, and if they're depressed or they want to get away, like they play these games. It's it's not harming anybody. It's fictional. It's exaggerated for the sake of being exaggerated.
Right. And really what this comes down to, I think, is it's not about violence in society. It's about censorship and people who don't understand something trying to control what they don't understand, what they're, I guess, maybe scared of because it offends them. I mean, think about it, like, yeah, you mentioned like your friend who's big into Legend of Zelda and you with GTA. I mean, think about it. If censorship was put in place, how many stories and how many pieces of fiction would not exist because they didn't, they couldn't be made because of those laws. And think about how many people would be robbed of that journey, of those stories that empowered them and gave them a mythos to be a part of. And, not necessarily something to believe in, but something that, brought them so much joy. And I mean, that's huge. That is culture right there. And I think about that kind of stuff, on my channel, since I talk about movies all the time. It's like, those stories matter. And, having like trying to place the baggage of laws and censorship on them is terrible, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, you think about countries, like the Middle East and Saudi Arabia, where everything's banned, everything is censored. They have a
Yeah.
select few movies that they can choose from. Any movie that references God or anything, like they banned Bruce Almighty, like they'll ban so many things. Not saying like Bruce Almighty is like this necessary film everybody should watch, but the point is, like, yeah, it's living under censorship is not good, and that's the right and the freedoms that we have here, and we are able to be to enjoy what we want. It's important to keep that close.
Think about, and it's funny that you mentioned those countries because, okay, so who has more problems with, like in their societies,
Yeah.
us or them? Who has more censorship in regards to violence in media, us or them?
Yeah, yeah.
You know?
And as someone who is, an immigrant and someone who, I visit other countries. So many people are also, they complain about America and all the problems we have. Man, we live good. Like I love America. People start complaining and like, oh, this country, da da da. It's like, leave. If you don't like it, leave.
Right.
You know.
Go, right.
Yeah. Maybe that will help you. Seriously, if someone is honestly, they don't like, the current state or like the country and they think it's bad, maybe go to another country. You'll see the ways, the freedoms we have and the privileges we have. Having the police,
Yeah.
that's the main thing. Being able to, enjoy, your town and your neighborhood free of crime. It's people don't realize that. So I think this is kind of like it's not a good fight that they're fighting with the violence in video games. I don't see the link for it. And then they mentioned movies as well. Like movies is in a weird state now too. I don't. We're allowed to see. It is a point to raise in the. I think Trump. I think he said this in the video I played, where he was saying how like we're allowed to have all this violence and stuff, but they're not allowed to have like sexual content. Like it's a harsher like rating or something where they don't give a shit about blowing people up and violence and stuff, but it's different with like sexual content. I do find that kind of interesting how weird, different like different ways we look at things, how different ways people look at things.
Yeah, and yeah, the thing that's interesting about that is it's kind of like, what affects us, like when you think about the violence in film, like what affects us more, like what makes us, kind of maybe cringe more? Is it where the superhero throws the other guy into a brick wall and everything's like, and it, like, the whole building comes down, or when that person has to like slice open their thumb a little bit to squeeze out some blood? The second one, because it's a little bit more relatable, and I think, with sex and on film and stuff, it's like it affects us differently than, seeing some violence, which we know isn't real. Yeah, and I mean, yeah, I don't know. Like we can sit there and talk about, oh, like we need to censor that and stuff, but it's like, look, come on, guys, we're growing up in the age of the internet. Like the millennials were already pretty desensitized to like porn. I think the Gen Z is, like I think when probably some authority figure stands up and says, "All right, everyone, be careful what you watch," and they probably are all just snickering, like, "Okay, sure."
But do you think that's kind of a bad thing? Because that is something that it is kind of an unpopular opinion that I hold, and a lot of people don't agree with me, but it is just my opinion, is that we are seeing a different change with young men, and that's why, like, so you have the mass shooters, but you also see the very high suicide rate of men, right?
Yeah.
Perhaps feeling disenfranchised, feeling lost, not having a place. And I think with pornography, or just porn, think about, like, the first time I saw porn, like, the internet didn't exist. I was on a school bus and we still had like the Playboy magazines and like the porn magazines. And I was like, that's when I first saw it. But nowadays, like, people at an instant, like, kid can pick up a tablet or a phone, or just get on a computer and see like crazy shit like Pornhub and all this different stuff. And I think you have I think that does have kind of like a negative effect on like young men and stuff, not in the sense of like, oh, they don't respect women or they don't do this, but I feel like that's why maybe they are kind of socially awkward, and they're not, like, if they want to have sex, if they want to, like, feel pleasure, like, they're not going out now and trying to get a girl, or they're less likely to talk to girls and stuff, like, oh, I can just jerk off and whatever, MGTOW all the way. That's another thing too, with the existence of MGTOW. And I just need, soon we're gonna have sex robots. Japan's already freaking lining them up, the factories of having just sex robots. We can, I'll just have a robot to have sex anytime, and women who, I see the MGTOW and they're like, oh, women, they're nothing good for you. I'm so glad I'm not in a relationship. And I'm someone who does kind of value those traditional relationships and value of two people getting together. What's your opinion on that?
Yeah, I mean, I will say right now, just to clarify my position on that, is that while I think it's a reality that we can't stop young people from being exposed to, pornography in the age of the internet, I don't think it's a healthy thing for kids to be seeing all that stuff. I mean, no way. I don't think it's good for young men or young women to be exposed to that stuff at such a young age. And when people talk about the good old days, like you mentioned, yeah, it's like, there was a good old days where, that stuff was basically like a dirty secret. I mean, you had to like go downtown in some back alleyway to get access to that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
I think it does affect men. And, I think the way to combat that, because we can't stop people from being exposed to it, is just to try to have more honest conversations and teach, just not just try to instill morality in people. It's like, kids aren't dumb. You don't have to sit there and tell a kid like, don't do this because it's bad. No, you can sit there and explain the value of what something is and isn't. That you can explain the value of of traditional relationships and the fulfillment that can bring, and how to look for the right person to have in your life. You can explain to kids the values of morality, and it's like, hey, if you put these good things in your life, good things are going to come to you, and you're just going to be happier. It's like you can explain those things to people so they're not as likely to get addicted to bad things, or gravitate to it as much, I think.
Yeah. I think that's I mean, you hit the point on the head there when it comes to education. Teaching, hey, yeah, this thing exists. We're not going to shelter you. That doesn't really work. That's why you have these kids who they'll go out, and these little kids, and they'll go out and they'll drink and steal cigarettes and stuff because it's the bad. They just want to rebel. So you have to be very careful with that. I had one final point I wanted to bring up, but I don't know. Was there something else that you wanted to talk about?
No, I'm good, man. Yeah, go for it.
So yeah, the last thing I wanted to bring about, have you seen that So as someone who is a huge fan, or you know, a huge fan of action movies and, kind of like that masculine character, right? You know, you had the age of that, and that's kind of died out, right? When you have the Stallone movie or the Schwarzenegger movie, or John Claude Van Damme, right? Back in those days, and they would be the star, they would be the movie star, and they would have their own movie and be playing the different role nowadays. And do you know who Anthony Mackie is, the actor?
Oh, that name's super familiar. Not
He's
sure though.
he plays the Falcon in like the Marvel movies, in the Captain
Oh,
America.
sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So he was being interviewed. I can't find the interview right now, but he was being interviewed, and he said like, "Oh, superhero movies are what kind of killed those type of action movies, because now you'll have all these characters, all these Marvel, DC, comic book characters and stuff, and their face is being covered, and they're playing like a role, as opposed to before. You had the star. You had like Schwarzenegger. He had different roles in different movies. He would be different action movies. But nowadays, it doesn't really matter who they put under the mask, and that's why he's saying that those kind of died down. Did you ever hear that, or do you kind of agree with that, or what's your opinion on that?
I disagree because, for one thing, what kind of killed, first off, Hollywood only makes two kinds of movies anymore. They make Oscar bait, and they make these giant PG-13 tentpole films. I mean, there isn't really a whole lot else going on. It's not that Hollywood stopped making action movies specifically, it's that they stopped making all kinds of movies specifically, and now they only really make they make sci-fi action films that are high concept, but are neither really science fiction and are neither really action. It works really well for the comic book genre, but not really well for a lot of anything else. And the other thing too is that, in the age of the internet, where celebrities just aren't that impressive anymore. It's like,
Yeah.
This celebrity that you're putting in this movie, who we know from their Twitter account is out of touch with the rest of us, gets their ass pampered every day, who's just not cool, and is really annoying most of the time, seems to be kind of annoying. They're just not cool. I mean, it's like, you got people on the internet, on YouTube, who have way more influence than they do. So,
Sure.
I think it's that kind of killed the idea of the packaged movie. But I think it's because Hollywood has shrunk so much. It's like, if these people can't get a role in this Marvel universe, then they don't really have a place. You think about, I mean, even it's like, you think about some of the lower budget action films that come out now. It's like still starring Schwarzenegger or Stallone. It's just really, really low key, and I mean, maybe those two guys sometimes.
They're definitely not the mainstream anymore. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. But there's not even a whole lot of new people taking their place. It's still the old guys. Go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, I was just gonna say that when it comes to I talk about a lot, like I talk a lot about movies on my channel as well. A lot of thing with movies now is it is kind of I remember being a kid, and when Spider-Man came out, the Tobey Maguire one, and I also X-Men, a couple of years before that, I was like, oh my God, this is so cool. Like, we're seeing X-Men and Spider-Man, in real movies. This is like, I was a kid and I was like, this is awesome. Like, it was the best thing ever. And then I would think, like, in the future, we're going to have like Thor, like we're going to have a Thor movie one day. We're going to have a Captain America movie one day. Like, that's going to be so cool. But now, like, especially with Marvel, it's like they're all kind of the same movies, and I don't know, like, I'm liking them. I feel like I'm liking them less and less, even though I grew up with those characters and stuff. I don't know, like, I saw that video by him talking about like the action star, and it's like, I mean, in general, Hollywood and movies are changing so much now, But I thought that was an interesting point. I see kind of how why you disagree on that. I just found it very interesting, because I still go back, I feel like kind of like the golden era of like action movies was Schwarzenegger, like Commando and Terminator, Predator. Like I love those movies. I'll go back and watch them. And then, I was so excited when John Wick came out, John Wick and John Wick 2, where it's like, oh, this is so cool. Like this, I feel like this is like straight out of like the 80s or the 90s, and we're getting to watch it today,
Yeah, I felt the same way about John Wick too. And isn't it fascinating that these old films that are apparently unintelligent, that's what the film critics today would call them, or they're ironically funny, isn't it funny that we continue to go back to them and we want to experience those journeys time and time and time and again? But a Marvel film, it's like I'm lucky to get through one of those twice. It's what is going on there is entertainment wise is just so surface level and shallow that I just don't care to rewatch them again.
Yeah, that is true. I don't think there's one Marvel movie. I think there might be like 2 or 3 that I'll rewatch, but for the most part, I mean, there's certain Marvel movies I didn't even see. Like I didn't see Ant-Man. I didn't see what else. I think that was the only one, but there might be another one in there. But there's some of them. It's like Doctor Strange. Like I saw Doctor Strange. It's like, man, I will never watch this again. Like
right.
It's completely cookie cutter. Like people are like, oh, it's the best one since Iron Man. The first Iron Man was pretty good. I'll actually rewatch that one. But all the other ones, like, I don't have any desire to rewatch them. It is true about that. I never even thought about that.
Yeah, it comes back to, the characters themselves. I mean, something that was cool about the first Iron Man is that Tony was such a flawed character, but he was so charismatic that you liked him.
Yeah.
And because he doesn't have superpowers, he's just like a rich dude. It's like you can kind of relate to him in ways that I just don't think you can relate to some of these other characters. Like I think that's actually another thing about the older action films is it's like, look, if you have a character, yes, okay, what Rambo does is impossible, but not really. Some guy could just be that highly trained and, could, take on this small army and win. It's very unlikely, but, the odds are against him, and that's what makes it so cool. It's like a lot of times, it's like when you have a character who has superpowers and can just throw everyone around and just kind of melt through every bad guy who comes their way like it's nothing, that is so boring. That is like George Lucas syndrome of boring, where the Jedi Knight can just cut through millions of droids and it doesn't matter.
Well, speaking of George Lucas with Star Wars, I feel like it's a stark contrast. My last live stream with the Critical Unbeliever, we're talking about Black Panther, Marvel movies, Star Wars. We talk about Star Wars a lot, and you look at the original Star Wars, and you have Luke Skywalker, and the reason, like, everyone around the world who spoke different languages and different backgrounds, we can all relate to him because he has that struggle. He's like that. I feel like Star Wars, like it's like a coming of age movie, right? With Luke, who doesn't know his path and is lost, and he finally decides to do something about it, and goes through a journey, and he fails. The second movie, he fails completely. He busts his ass because he doesn't listen to Yoda, and he's kind of like that, just stubborn character, and you can relate to that. It's like, man, you can relate to that so much. And then you have the contrast with the new movies with Rey, and it's like, Rey can do everything. I think even like Daisy Ridley, like a couple of days ago, she had an interview where she said, I believe Rey has no weaknesses. And I was like, oh, like, that's so cool. Like, oh, no, that's not cool at all. I can't relate to a character like that at all.
No, of course not. Yeah, Rey is a very, very boring Mary Sue character. And yeah, it's like your story is only as good as the conflict your protagonist has to overcome. It's pretty very basic storytelling, and the storytelling in the new movies is horrible. I mean, my God, The Last Jedi is probably one of the worst films I've seen in a while.
Yeah, it's sad. It's sad.
It is.
We're in a particular place now with movies and media, but before we wrap this up, was there any final points that we didn't touch upon that you would like to touch upon?
No, I think I'm good, man. I do agree that we're in a weird spot with media. I think video game films are probably actually going to be the next thing. It looks likely the new Tomb Raider is going to succeed, and I think that will usher in a new that might actually usher in the phasing out of comic book films in favor of video game films. Possibly that might be the new trend, and probably.
Where you're going to be experiencing a movie like that?
Well, it's the adaptation. I mean, where they take like strong video game franchises and they adapt them into films, because comic book movies were a joke, like up until really the late '90s, early millennium, and then now they're the biggest thing.
Oh, yeah.
And they've been the biggest thing for so long now. Like I have my ear in a couple film circles, and it's like, okay, people are probably starting to are starting to kind of understand that maybe this has ran its course. So what's next? Well, if Tomb Raider is really successful, they'll start buying up, the video game properties that they can get their hands on left and right. And they'll start putting those and greenlighting those and putting them into production and start greenlighting sequels if those films do well. So you could very easily see video game films take over comic books in a couple years, quite possibly. That's where I can see things going.
Yeah, I know they're gonna do like an official Mario movie, or Super Mario. I don't know how that's gonna work out. That didn't work out the last time.
Right.
Yeah, there's certain games that would be awesome movies, like Legend of Zelda. It's like perfect. That's like a perfect for a movie.
Yeah, if the right person gets their hands on it and is allowed to do their thing, yes, it could be awesome. But it's like, if it gets filtered through, a bunch of like marketing suits, and they basically just try to make it as safe as possible so it appeals to the entire world, then no, it'll suck. And they give it to some gun for hire who has no idea what they have their hands on. Yeah, it'll suck. But hopefully that doesn't happen.
We will see what happens. So thank you guys for watching this stream tonight with us. Thank you for joining me. I am trying to do more of these. I'm trying to invite more people to be on this channel, reaching out to new and different creators. If anyone who's watching want to reach out to me and would like to talk to me about a certain subject, please reach out to me on my Twitter or even in the YouTube comments. Let me know if you like this stream. Please make sure to like it, and I will catch you guys in the next stream. Peace out.